The Royal Lodge, the 30-room residence of Prince Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, has sparked public outrage over its lavish grandeur and the prince's right to live in such splendor on a crown estate property.
The gates slammed shut, the lights went out, and just like that, the woman who once floated through 30 gilded rooms like they were her personal kingdom vanished into the night without a whisper. And if you think that was a quiet departure, think again, because what really happened inside Royal Lodge before Sarah Ferguson disappeared is far more humiliating than anyone dared to admit publicly. For 20 years, she lived inside one of the most coveted royal residences in Britain. 30 rooms, manicured grounds, Windsor Great Park stretching like a green ocean around her. A life most people only see in glossy documentaries. Royal Lodge wasn't just an address. It was a statement. It was power by proximity. It was survival wrapped in velvet curtains and guarded gates. And she didn't just live there. She lived there after the divorce, after the scandal, after the world laughed, after the tabloid photographs, after the fall from grace. She walked those corridors as a divorced duchess who technically no longer belonged. And yet she stayed, rent-free, protected, embedded. She called it the tripod, herself, Prince Andrew, their daughters. A modern family arrangement, she said. Practical, loving, united. It sounded wholesome. It sounded mature. It sounded almost admirable. But here's the uncomfortable question that began whispering through palace corridors long before the public caught on. Was the tripod about parenting? Or was it about clinging to status neither of them could afford to lose? Because while she was giving interviews about family unity, shadows were gathering behind those heavy wooden doors. Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein was not new. The photographs, the visits, the headlines, they were ticking time bombs long before they exploded. And when the infamous BBC Newsnight interview aired in 2019, that catastrophic attempt at damage control, it wasn't just Andrew's credibility that disintegrated on national television. It was the foundation beneath Royal Lodge itself. The Pizza Express alibi, the awkward justifications, the chilling absence of empathy. It was a disaster so complete it felt surreal. And through every wave of public outrage, she stayed. She stood beside him. She defended him. She remained inside Royal Lodge. Why? Why would a woman who spent years trying to rebuild her image, children's books, charities, reinvention tours, tie herself so tightly to a scandal spiraling out of control? Because here's where the story turns darker. Her own connection to Epstein wasn't a footnote. It was documented. Emails, language, warmth, familiarity, words like brother, words like I am at your service, words that don't belong in casual acquaintance territory. When millions of Department of Justice documents surfaced, they didn't just brush against her reputation, they tore through it. The narrative of a gigantic mistake began to look thin. The carefully crafted distancing began to look strategic. And suddenly the palace silence felt less like loyalty and more like calculation. October 30th, 2025. That was the day everything shifted from slow decay to open execution. King Charles moved, titles stripped, honors revoked, lease terminated. Terminated, not revised, not negotiated. Terminated. A 75-year lease on Royal Lodge, a sweetheart arrangement that once looked untouchable, was done. Andrew had to leave, and in the official announcement, her name wasn't even mentioned. Not one sentence. After 15 years of living there post-divorce, after defending him publicly, after branding herself part of that inseparable trio, she was erased from the statement like an afterthought. Imagine that realization. Not just losing a home, but realizing you were never part of the official equation to begin with. And then came the whispers. Royal journalist Emily Maitlis, the very journalist who dismantled Andrew on live television years earlier, suggested that the pressure to remove him didn't just come from the king. There were reports of a meeting. Prince William, Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie, the daughters. According to accounts, they allegedly warned their father, leave, or risk further damage that could touch them too. Whether every detail is verifiable or not, the result was unmistakable. The family closed ranks. Andrew was out. And when Andrew is out, what happens to the woman who anchored herself to him for survival? The countdown began. The initial deadline loomed, January 25th, 2026. But something even more unsettling had already happened. Her last confirmed sighting at Royal Lodge was in September 2025, months before the official deadline, months before Andrew's final exit, months before the DOJ documents detonated publicly. She was seen getting into a car, face turned away, no statement, no explanation, and then nothing. No social media, no appearances, no interviews, silence. Think about that timing, September 2025, just weeks before King Charles's October announcement. Was it coincidence? Or did she read the writing on the wall before the public did? Did someone warn her? Did she know the palace was about to pull the trigger? Because by the time the announcement hit, she had already quietly disappeared. Meanwhile, her professional empire was collapsing in broad daylight. 6 companies winding down. 6. Her charity closing closing, major organizations distancing themselves, patronages removed quietly from websites, not with dramatic denunciations but with careful erasure. That kind of silence is louder than outrage. It signals toxicity. Former aides reportedly advised her to step back completely, get a regular job, avoid the spotlight. The idea of a tell-all book floated and sank just as fast. The fallout would be catastrophic. And then came the most brutal detail of all. She had sold her London townhouse in 2025, the one property she owned independently, sold it in the same year the palace tightened the noose around Andrew. So when Royal Lodge closed its gates to her, she had nowhere permanent to go. Nowhere. Princess Beatrice had her own home. Princess Eugenie split her time between Portugal and Kensington Palace. Temporary solutions, maybe, but not stability. Sources began using a word that would have been unthinkable years earlier: homeless. A woman who lived inside a 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park, effectively without a home. And here's the twist that made palace advisors nervous. She reportedly inquired about Adelaide Cottage, the former home of Prince William and Catherine. The optics alone were explosive, with Epstein documents resurfacing, with scrutiny intensifying. Granting her another grace and favor residence would have been political suicide. The answer appeared to be no. Meanwhile, Andrew finally left Royal Lodge on February 3rd, 2026, under cover of darkness. No ceremony, no farewell. He slipped away to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, modest compared to Royal Lodge. 2 reception rooms, a kitchen, a fraction of his former world. And she was nowhere near him. Reports placed her in the French Alps, then the United Arab Emirates, then at Art Basel in Doha alongside Princess Eugenie. Optics again. Her ex-husband arrested on February 19th, 2026, his 66th birthday, on suspicion of misconduct in public office related to alleged document sharing with Epstein. First senior British royal arrested in modern times. And where was she? Not in Norfolk, not at his side, not making statements. Strategic distance or self-preservation? The Wu is known for offering quiet refuge to prominent figures navigating legal storms. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. But here's the image that refuses to fade. 30 rooms once filled with presents. Curtains drawn, gates sealed, lights off. And the woman who called herself part of a royal tripod slipping into a car months before the final collapse, face turned away, vanishing before the humiliation could become public theater. The palace said nothing. No defense, no condemnation, nothing. That silence is not accidental. In royal strategy, silence is containment. Sarah Ferguson became a non-entity in official language, not attacked, not supported, simply erased, which raises the most uncomfortable question of all. Was Royal Lodge ever truly hers, or was she always just a tolerated extension of Andrew's lease? And when the lease died, so did her shelter. From royal privilege to exile by association, from Windsor Mansion to borrowed rooms, from public reinvention to public liability. The humiliation wasn't one explosive moment. It was slow, grinding, bureaucratic, clinical. No dramatic eviction scene, no screaming headlines at the gates, just a car, a turned face, and darkness swallowing everything. By the time February winds cut across Windsor Great Park, Royal Lodge no longer felt like a home. It felt like evidence. Evidence of how high she once stood. Evidence of how far she had fallen. 30 rooms that once echoed with royal proximity now sat heavy with consequence. And somewhere beyond those locked gates, Sarah Ferguson was no longer inside the story. She was running from it. Because humiliation is not always loud. Sometimes it is administrative. Sometimes it arrives in sealed envelopes, terminated leases, dissolved companies, quiet removals from patronage lists. Sometimes it arrives in 3 million pages of Department of Justice documents that don't scream your name, they simply include it. And inclusion was enough. The emails didn't just complicate her narrative, they dismantled it. For years, she insisted her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein had been a singular error, a lapse in judgment, a gigantic mistake. But the language inside those messages painted something more intimate, more entangled. Words of warmth, words of loyalty, words that sounded transactional and personal all at once. When the public read phrases describing Epstein as the brother I have always wished for, the temperature shifted instantly. That is not the vocabulary of accidental association. That is the vocabulary of closeness, of comfort, of reliance. And then came the detail that stopped even her defenders cold. References to lunches where her daughters would be present. Dates overlapping with Epstein's conviction history. Timelines that made people uncomfortable. Timelines that made palace advisors sweat. Because proximity is everything in royal life. And proximity to the wrong person can burn down entire wings of the institution. Inside the palace, silence hardened into strategy. No statements defending her. No statements condemning her. Just absence. In royal communications, absence is deliberate. It says says this chapter will not be acknowledged, therefore it will not exist. But the public doesn't forget so easily. By spring 2026, she was 66 years old with no permanent address, no official role, no active duchess duties, no charity platform, no functioning companies, and no title she could meaningfully leverage. The word duchess still floated around her name socially, but institutionally, it carried no weight. And yet, insiders whispered something astonishing. She reportedly believed she deserved another royal residence. She compared herself to Princess Diana, arguing she merited similar grace and favor treatment. That comparison alone reveals how disconnected the situation had become. Diana, whatever the turmoil of her life, was never entangled in Epstein documentation. Diana never appeared in federal investigative releases. Diana never faced questions about financial ties to a convicted offender. The palace knew the distinction. The public knew the distinction, and so the answer remained a cold, immovable no. Meanwhile, Andrew's arrest sent shockwaves that even the palace could not contain. February 19th, 2026, his birthday. Arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office related to alleged sharing of sensitive trade documents during his time as the UK's special representative. 11 hours in custody. Released without charge. Investigation ongoing. The first senior British royal arrested in modern history. That kind of headline doesn't fade quickly. King Charles issued a brief expression of deepest concern. Beatrice and Eugenie remained silent. The institution braced. And Sarah Ferguson? Reports placed her abroad. French Alps. United Arab Emirates. Doha. Appearances at art fairs alongside Eugenie. The optics were surreal. The man she once anchored herself to for stability was facing arrest, and she was continents away. Was that distance emotional, legal, strategic? Legal analysts quietly suggested authorities might want to speak to her regarding her connections. Whether that would happen remained unclear. But speculation doesn't need confirmation to damage reputations. It simply needs oxygen. And here's the most brutal truth of all. She did not leave Royal Lodge publicly disgraced in a dramatic spectacle. She left before the crescendo, before the headlines peaked, before the arrest, before the avalanche of documents flooded the narrative. Her last confirmed sighting in September 2025 now looks less like coincidence and more like foresight. Did she know what October would bring? Did she sense the termination was inevitable? Or did she simply feel the walls tightening and choose to vanish before the humiliation became irreversible? History suggests redemption requires confession, clarity, and distance. Whether she can or will attempt that remains uncertain. What is certain is this: Royal Lodge is no longer hers. The tripod is broken. The illusion of permanent royal shelter has dissolved. And somewhere beyond Windsor, beyond Sandringham, beyond Doha and the Alps, Sarah Ferguson is confronting the reality that power borrowed is never power owned. The mansion is silent. The gates are sealed. And the woman once sheltered inside 30 royal rooms slipped away before the world could watch her final humiliation unfold, but the consequences followed anyway. The darkness she left under did not hide the fall. It only delayed it.